Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I am leaving for Door County in about an hour. I'm pretty excited for it because it's actually going to be a little getaway weekend for Sarah and I. We're going to drop Hank and Duke off at Sarah's parents on the way over there, and it should be a good, fun, relaxing weekend. We haven't had a weekend without the kids in, I don't know, it's probably been well over a year at this point. So we're really looking forward to it. The downside is I'm going to one of my favorite areas in the world, the Sturgeon Bay, Door County area, which is also known as one of the best smallmouth bass fisheries in the world. And I'm going without my boat. So I'm not going to get any fishing in, which is kind of a bummer. But every time I think about the Door County area, I think about the crystal clear water where you can see down 20 feet at times. And it had me thinking about doing a quick video for you guys to help you improve your clear water fishing. It's definitely apparent to me that there are a lot of anglers out there that feel overwhelmed anytime they fish clear water. And it really should not be something that takes you out of your element. There are a few things that you should tweak, and that's what we're going to go over today. But if you implement these couple of little things, I assure you, you can conquer clear water fisheries where you can see the fish a lot of times before they can see you. So before I get into those, though, I do want to remind you guys that if you enjoy my content and you want to support the channel and you are not yet a subscriber, please hit that subscriber button and become a subscriber of the channel. It's very much appreciated. And hopefully it's tips like this that keep you coming back. So living in Wisconsin here, we've got a pile of natural lakes. We've got the Great Lakes. We have clear fisheries or we have rivers or river fisheries, which are going to be stained or tannic colored, sometimes even muddy if you're talking about the Mississippi River. But a very large percentage of the lakes in my neck of the woods, the upper Midwest, over in the Northeast, you're talking about very, very clear fisheries because they're natural lakes. They have no water flow coming into them and they have no water flow going out of them, at least not any major impact where if you get a lot of rain, it's going to muddy things up. You may have a small creek coming in, a small creek flowing out, but we're not talking major river systems. And generally speaking, when you have these clear water fisheries, it tends to really get some anglers confused and just takes them out of their game because a lot of times the fish can see you well before you can see them. So some of the things that you're going to want to do to really increase the number of bites that you get when fishing really clear fisheries. So I'm going to give you 5 points. The first is going to come down to the speed of your bait movement. So what I mean by that is you want to either have a very fast retrieve or you want a very slow moving retrieve. Generally speaking, the faster you move the bait, the better reaction strikes that you're going to generate because fish from further away can see it. So that means you're going to draw fish to it. But more importantly, that fast movement of your bait will prevent the fish from getting a really good look at it. They either commit or they don't commit. And a lot of times, if they don't commit, you still can see them. And therefore, you can then throw a slower moving bait in behind them to generate that kind of finesse approach, which gets those fish to strike. So for me, it's a 1-2 punch. It's generally very fast moving bait. So if you're fishing a jerk bait, really, move it fast. If you're fishing a spinner bait, burn it. If you're fishing a topwater bait, think about burning it as well. Crankbait, same thing, really fast retrieves. The opposite end of that is your finessey, extremely slow moving baits. And this isn't necessarily just finesse. I mean, it could be if you're fishing a drop shot, either like a really heavy weight to get your bait to fall very fast to create reaction strikes, or I like a real light one that's going to just kind of slowly fall to the bottom. Ned rigs are the same sort of thing. I like wacky rigs are a great clear water bait because it's such a slow falling bait. So you want one of those two extremes. Those are going to be your friend. Don't pick up a crankbait and think about, kind of just a slow retrieve along a grass line or a break line or a rock edge. Generally, you'd be much better off burning that crankbait, getting it to crash into things in the bottom, deflect, and create those reaction strikes. So that's a really big thing that a lot of people miss out on is recognizing the speed of your retrieve. The next is going to be your color, and this is very similar to retrieve speed. I know that sounds weird, but really what you want is a very natural color or an extremely bright, crazy color. And it's for the same exact reasons. Your bright colors, your bright methylates, your chartreuses, things like that will have a lot of draw power. So if the fish are in aggressive mood, it's something that can really draw fish from a long ways away, and you can have some incredible days of fishing. You wouldn't think that you would be able to use some crazy colored bait in clear water, but you really, really can. The opposite end of that is like your finesse, your slow retrieves. You're actually talking about your natural colors, your green pumpkins, your browns, your cinnamons, things that are going to match with the background, match the bottom color, match the weed growth that's in that area, because a lot of these natural clear bodies of water have very good weed growth because you get a lot of sun penetration, therefore the grass can grow. But your bait choice is generally a very important thing as well in clear water. And I would add that you should probably play around with bait color a lot more in clear water than dark water. When color matters most is in clear water, and a fine-tuned change to your color can really make a big difference. So if you're throwing something that's maybe translucent with a little bit of like silver bait fishy look, and you're throwing it with a blue back and it's working okay, or the fish aren't committing, try just changing it to maybe a greenish colored back. That slight change can make a very big difference. It usually doesn't matter in muddier water, makes a big difference in clear water. So make sure you're paying attention to the small detail of your color. The next is going to be your bait size. And again, it's kind of similar. I like to go very small or very big. Generally speaking, in clear water, I would say 95% of the time, 90% of the time, I'm going with much smaller presentations. I'm not going to be throwing mid-range stuff. Generally speaking, I feel like that smaller presentation gives the fish a smaller profile, to give them a not nearly as good of a look at it. So if it's a smaller profile, they can't see it as well. And again, it's something where they have to come investigate it. And one thing we know about fish is a lot of times when they're interested in a bait, just to figure out what it is, they have to pick it up with their mouth. A lot of times they don't eat our baits because they're hungry. They're curious, especially smallmouth and spotted bass. They're very much this way. They'll pick something up just to investigate it. And a smaller profile bait generally gives them a worse look at it, but at the same time, it's a smaller bait. So if they do pick it up just to investigate it, a lot of times they'll suck that in better than they will a larger profile bait. The opposite side of that is if you do want to throw your big glide baits, your big swim baits, your big top waters, they can really perform well in very clear water because they have such good draw power. The fish, it's clear water fisheries are so visual that a big bait like that gets a lot of fish interested. Now, again, anytime you're throwing that big stuff, a lot of times you draw the fish to it. You don't actually get them to commit. But if you know where they live, you can go back and try some other presentations, which can increase your odds at a big fish. The next thing that's really important, so the fourth thing that's very important when fishing clear water, is to generally fish areas where the surface is broken up by some form of wave action. I'm not saying you got to be fishing in 3-foot rollers, but a small ripple on the water is generally better than flat, calm conditions. And the more wave action you get, generally the better in an area, because it really will help kind of silt up the water, which creates good feeding opportunities for the fish, but also prevents them from getting a really good look at your bait. So generally speaking, clear water fish will be more aggressive when that water gets a little bit of color to it, or at least when the surface gets broken up, because it really prevents them from getting a great look at your bait. So from that standpoint, they tend to commit to your bait better. Because one thing that's one issue we all have in clear water is the number of fish that we see that look at our bait but don't actually commit to it, because they do get a really good look at it. And from that standpoint, all of these things that we're trying to do in clear water is to limit them from getting a fantastic view of that bait so that they actually have to eat it. Whether they're eating it out of curiosity or they're eating it out of actual hunger, remains to be seen. But the point here is you got to get them to bite your bait. And in clear water, it's generally harder than in dirty water. And your wave action, your surface movement is generally going to be something that's going to help you to get those fish to bite. The last tip for you is to spend more time concentrating on flats. Generally speaking, I feel like flats are something that can be a little bit overwhelming for a lot of anglers because it's a lot of similar cover over a large area. In my experience, though, flats tend to play much better in clear water fisheries than in dirty water fisheries. So what I mean by a flat is maybe you have a main lake flat that comes off the shoreline for a half mile, stretches out into the main lake, and it's no more than 10 foot of water. It's just a big flat. But usually on these flats, you've got areas that the fish will concentrate in to feed. Could be isolated cover, could be a grass line, could be a rock vein, could be a break line that separates the flat from deep water. All of those things generally will come into play, but flats seem to really play better for me in clear water. And I think it's because the fish are much more reliant on sight feeding. And from that standpoint, those flats become much better players for them to get up to roam around to find the bait fish versus in muddy water conditions where I feel like the fish really have to take advantage of their surroundings to help them feed. What I mean by that is if they can't see them as well, they need to be able to push them into a brush pile. They need to be able to push the bait into a bluff wall or into the side of a break line, the side of a point, a hump, something like that. And a lot of that has to do with they just can't track the bait fish as well as they can, say, on a flat. If they're on a flat, they generally can do one of two things. They either push them to the surface or push them to the bottom. Usually it's pushing them to the surface to feed because that limits where they can get to. The point here is because it's much more visual, the flats become a bigger player because the fish can actually feed without having to have some form of structure to push that bait fish into. So don't overlook flats in your clear water fisheries. So those are 5 things you need to pay attention to. Finding some areas generally to have a little bit of surface wave action that breaks up that surface. You want to fish with either a really fast or slow retrieve. You want to fish with a really bright or natural colored bait. You want to generally fish with a smaller profile bait. And then the last thing that we just talked about is don't overlook your flats. If you head out to a clear water fishery and you do these 5 things, guys, I assure you, you will have more success than you generally have. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. New video coming out tomorrow.